All righty, good morning.
This
This
meeting is
meeting is
being
being
recorded.
recorded.
All righty, good morning. I am Selma and I am from Gardeneers. We are here at the Home and Reels Farm and we are doing the Pests, Weeds, and Diseases workshop for Chicago Road Food here today. What is this, July 23rd? All righty. And so what we're going to do is for these first few moments, we are going to just basically, if you don't mind, in the chat, if you could say your name, say what type of garden you have, whether it's in ground, raised beds, or you have fabric grow bags, and tell us how long have you been growing. Okay, so if you could drop that in the chat for me, I greatly appreciate it. And that will be our icebreaker so we can figure out who's on the call with us. And as people join us, we'll continue. So we're going to go for a brief tour of the farm, the Home and Reels Farm, and then we'll jump into our weeds, pest and disease identification, and just Q&A, okay? We'll be taking breaks, conversation breaks intermittently to make sure that we're all getting a good rest of our lungs, but also that's going to open us up for questions, opportunity to have questions. So if you have questions, of course, just shoot them out there in the chat, or you can unmute. But if you're like, "Ooh, I want to wait," there, I will be sure to pause about every 15 minutes or so to make sure I'm opening up for questions. Okay. All right. So let's go, y'all. All righty. So here we have the Home and Reels Farm. We are located at 910 South Holman in the North Lawndale neighborhood. Our zip code is 60624. Now, this railway line is a part of the Altenheim line, which is a part of the CSX railway system of railway lines. Now, at one point in time, this railway had 8 different tracks, and those tracks actually connected and intersected in a building that used to be in that parking lot, both of those parking lots, which used to be the Sears and Roebuck factory. So that was built in about 1905, 1906. And so that factory stood for more than 70 years. All the buildings in this area were actually given in a trust to the Foundation for Home and Square by the former Sears and Roebuck Foundation. And so in collaboration with them throughout the years, or at least back in 2017, Gardeneers is an organization, we started stewarding this land. And here we have about 10 raised beds, which are 9 are right here, which we have just regular wood. We stained it with this nice wine colored stain to help increase the life expectancy of the wood, because we all know organic materials deteriorate. And we tend to grow, we grow mint in these beds. We have borage, we have different flowers, mostly edible, but these things are plants that most people, they know about them, but they've never really seen them. So most of our youth, they know about what spearmint is, but they've never actually had it. And so they find out that real mint doesn't taste like the bubble gum. Cool. And so, yep. Gotcha. All right, one moment.
Yeah. Tell Mike, please. Hear you.
Looking at a Zoom from garden.
Danielle, how's the volume?
The TV is fine. You know, when you sit in that bench on the side of the TV,
Yeah.
you gotta watch that thing in the wall. That's why the TV been acting bad.
Here
I
we
mean,
have
set the whole thing,
sunflowers.
because if you
We like to
sit
have
next to
sunflowers
it,
because one, they grow very large, very quickly, and you get to see a lot of different pollinators as they're doing work on the seed heads. As you can see, we have regular flies, we have some bumblebees, and so they're a great way to attract pollinators to any garden. They're a great way to attract pollinators to any garden because, of course, depending on what types of crops you're growing, you need to make sure you have a pollinator population that can go in and out of your different flowers to make sure pollination occurs. Because without pollination, we won't have such beautiful vegetables such as this squash right here, right? And so these are things that we here at this farm like to make sure we have readily available, not just for us for aesthetics, because let's be honest, these sunflowers do look amazing, but we want to make sure they're ready for insects as well, okay? Because not all insects are bad insects. I know most of us, when we think of insects, we call them bugs because they annoy us. But believe it or not, if we got rid of or eradicated our pollinators, over 70% of the food that we consume on a daily basis would disappear. Okay. And so I appreciate you all for coming to this workshop to learn about the insects that do more harm than good. But as we continue to have these conversations, let's remember that we want to get the bad insects to a threshold, a low threshold, so much so that we don't threaten the other insect populations, the ones that actually help us out. Okay? Here we have some strawberries growing. They'll spread over the years. You'll notice in my strawberries, now all of these were transplants. I took them from a different site. And you'll notice that some of them, they have these nice bright green leaves, but some of them on the edge, they have this discoloration, such as this browning. Usually that comes sometimes from transplant shock. So when you move plants, they have to get used to their new environment. And sometimes what they do is they'll use energy from those plants in order to create new growth. And so that's not always a bad thing. When we look at plants like this, we want to make sure less than about 25% of it is discolored. If we go more than 25%, you need to start looking into other things. There may be a deficiency, and depending on the ways in which the discolorations form on the leaves, it might be an insect or a chemical problem. But we can always talk about that during office hours. So let's move on to this bed with these peppers and these tomatoes. If you look at plants like this, these all look healthy. You see no discoloration, predominantly green throughout the entire plant. On all these plants, we have peppers right here. Just in case you've never seen how jalapeno grows, that's how it grows. You have some kale right here, and then you have some tomatoes right here. And so as you can see, with these tomatoes, our UA intern Crystal did an awesome job in trellising them. And so we don't really see a lot of different problems on these. Sometimes we will, you can get different types of fungus on your tomatoes if you don't prune them high enough. Or if the leaf material is too close to the soil surface. So that's one of the reasons why we want to minimize leaves touching the soil, minimize any leaves that are too close to the ground, because like today, we got that rain earlier this morning, right? I don't know if y'all slept through it, it woke me up. As rain or, we water, that water hits the ground, it's going to pop back up and land on those leaves, which makes the leaves a susceptible home for pathogens, insects, as well as viruses. So as we're thinking about our gardens, we want to make sure that we're pruning them so that we can get a good airflow. We can minimize transference of things we don't want on our plants unintentionally, by like water. And that's one of the best ways. Before we start thinking about chemicals, we can control pests, insects, and disease. Okay. We got some more peppers and some kale back here.
Hang on for 1 second, Selma. Yeah, we got a lot of tomato growers, including myself, and that was kind of new to me to prune down by the earth. Can you just go back over that? Okay. So you first want to trellis it to pull it north? Cool.
So for our tomato growers, since we do have a lot of tomato growers on the call, yes. So most people think you just plant a tomato and you just let it go. Well, you can. However, if you want it to be more efficient and you want to produce more fruit, which is what we call tomatoes, you want to make sure you're diverting energy to the right areas. So the reason we prune and trellis tomatoes, it's a multi-level reasons. One, so when I told you that you want to prune really close to the ground, your leaves, you don't want to have leaves too close. So even these dudes, as this grew up, you see we have those leaves that's a little bit too close, right? I personally believe that you shouldn't have anything closer than a foot from the top of the soil, right? Because as we think about rain droplets as they hit, some aren't going to go very far, but you do have some that come down with a velocity where it may bounce up, right? And the great thing / not so great thing about water is an awesome vector or an awesome vehicle for diseases to like just live and thrive and move around. And so what you'll also do by not pruning, and of course you're leaving that open for water to accumulate, when it's not pruned, this area down here in the soil, between the soil and those bottom leaves, it gets kind of warm, kind of humid, like in your shower. Now, when it does that, that makes it a perfect environment for fungus. So we have things like powdery mildew. We have all of these things that'll basically get on our plant. And although it won't completely harm the plant, it will decrease the effectiveness and efficiency in which the plant will make energy for our fruit, which means it'll take longer for us to get tomatoes like these. So you see how we got these nice green ones right there. You got these nice ripe red ones. These are actually black crim. I can tell from the shoulders. So when we say shoulders, this part where we have the stem of the plant, and then that top part, and then this is the body. And so real quick, let me show. We got our shoulder right here. And then this is our body down here. So shoulder, body. Cool. All right. Cool.
Hey, thank you.
What other tomato questions do we have while we're at a tomato?
Danielle? Any tomato questions?
Well, none in the chat yet. So yeah, feel free to put in the chat different questions, y'all. I have a question though. Can you start like a new plant when you take off a tomato?
Okay, cool. So the question that was just posed is, can you start a new tomato plant from parts that you take off the tomato? Yes, but you have to take a particular part. And I'll go into that. Now, the great/bad thing for today is Crystal does a great job on pruning her tomatoes. But what I will show you is, she was great. She really pruned this tomato. So we'll just show you anatomically.
This is where she pruned?
Yeah, this is where, got one. All right, so we have this node right here. It's an area where we get new growth.
Yeah,
right?
for 1 second.
Right?
Point to it again.
So this right here, this is our node. You see we have all these different stems coming off where we got leaves. This is cut, this has been pruned, this has been pruned. Well, on a tomato plant, theoretically, when you have your main stem, which is this thickest stem right here, and you have a leaf coming off like here, anything that's growing, they should theoretically be 90 degrees, maybe off like a degree or two. We don't have to be petty. But anything growing in between this main stem and this leaf within that 90 degrees, we call those suckers. And although they do create more energy for the plant, they also take away energy because they require it as well, right? So what we do, those are the things that we go through and prune. And believe it or not, this dude right here, this dude right there, he's actually a sucker. If you look, he comes from all the way under here, comes down, and then he goes up. You can take a sucker like this. You're gonna snap him off real nice and neat. See that dude? And then you can put that in some soil and take care of it like a regular plant. And yes, you will get a whole new tomato plant. It will take longer to grow because now this is a baby plant. But yes, you can, that is one way that you can, we call it propagate, but that's one way you can make new plants from tomatoes by taking the suckers. Now again, the suckers, we'll go back here, it's in between the main stem and the leaf. Whether it's up here in between the 90 degrees or the L shape of the stem or on the bottom. But if it's in between main stem and leaf and it's growing, take it off. You can trash it. Or if you just really have a thing for tomato plants, you can make new tomato plants. This is a quicker way to produce plants than growing them from seed. And also you can make sure, really weird, most people don't do this, some people do. If you want to be sure that the tomato plants you grow has the traits of the tomato plant you grew. So if we are like, oh, I really liked these tomatoes on this plant, right? And I want to make sure my tomatoes come out like this plant. You take the suckers and you plant those. And you're going to make sure the genetics is preserved. And so that's a little extra. But if you're ever wondering, like, I want to maintain these genetic traits of this particular plant, suckers is the way to go. And you can give them to your homies.
All right. I have a additional question about what you just talked about, the suckers. They're kind of like seedlings and you put them in. What about time of year? So we're kind of coming up on the end of July. Can you do this? And then is there any way to produce tomato fruit?
Okay, so to be completely honest with you, this is not something I would do for this season. So taking suckers and planting them at this time of the year, you may get some tomatoes, but they won't be the best quality. This is something that if you think about earlier in the season, if you start your tomatoes indoors, say early March, mid-March, and they grow up and you're like, ooh, my neighbor wanted a tomato plant. I didn't plant enough for her. Or, oh, I know this lady at my church might want a tomato plant. If you want to produce it, but you don't want to wait that time in between seed and getting it ready to be able to give it to someone, that's when you want to do it. I would not take suckers from a tomato honestly, after Labor Day. So after the end of May, you're pushing it. Worst come to worst, I'd stop mid-June. Anything after that, I'm just pruning them for the health of the plant. You can prune them to give away or pot them up before June 15th, before Memorial Day. Yeah, it's the end of May. But after that, now you're just taking them for decorative plants. So yeah. I don't want to say you're wasting your time, but you won't get what you're looking for. All right, let's keep walking. All righty, y'all.
Can you take tomato plants indoors in the winter?
Can you take tomato plants indoors in the winter? Yes, you can if you have supplemental lighting. Now, the great thing about where we are is we have enough light between the two different solstices and the solstice and the equinox. However, once we get past, let's say September 26th, 24th, somewhere towards the end of September, we're going to start losing daylight. And because of that, most plants run off of a time system that is in relation to how much sun or infrared light they're receiving. And most indoor apartments, although the sun will come through the window, our windows are built so that they actually filter out the UV light that plants need. And so what you should do and could do, and there's some for like $20 on Amazon, you can actually get supplemental lighting and put your plants in like a corner and set up a timer. And yes, you can produce tomatoes indoors in the winter, but you need to have supplemental lighting, hopefully with the timer, or just be really diligent with it.
Great.
All right.
If
All right,
you don't have a lot of sun, can you grow tomatoes outdoors?
So unfortunately, if you don't have a lot of sun, you won't be as successful growing tomatoes outdoors because they are a full sun plant. Because you think about it like this, most plants that produce, or not produce, most plants that we eat the fruit of. So if we're not eating just the leaves, if we have to wait, then the flower comes and the flower gets pollinated, then it makes a fruit that has seeds in it. That's a lot of energy. And of course, we all know, hopefully we remember from like kindergarten and ninth grade biology, plants need sun in order to do photosynthesis. So if they don't have enough sun to do photosynthesis, which is how they create energy, creating these huge energy sinks such as fruits and seeds, it's not really going to happen. So you might get something, but it's going to be small. It's not going to be delicious because without enough sunlight, the plant is going to go through its life cycle, but it's going to be stressed. And because it's stressed, its main objective is going to be to just make sure it gets its genetic material out there in the form of seeds. And so it's not going to get a lot of seeds. It's just going to hit that bare minimum. And so in that bare minimum, the fruit won't taste good. So the peppers, the tomatoes, the eggplants, whatever, it won't taste great. It'll just have enough seeds so that plant can hopefully put its babies out there. And in some cases, you will just get a bushy plant. Just get a bushy plant with no fruit.
Speaking of babies.
Okay, yeah, we got some. This is Peanut, and this is Popcorn, the chicks. These are two new chicks we got here at the Home on Rails. Yeah, we raise chickens here, y'all. We got chickens and we have bees. This is a full garden that we actually do programming with 3 schools in the neighborhood. And the food we produce, we make sure we give out to the community. So that's one of the reasons why I wanted to be here.
So 3 schools?
3 schools. We do Holy Family Lutheran, DRW, which is a part of the Noble Network of Charter Schools, and Learn, or the Romano Butler campus. And so we're gonna walk in these high tunnels, just take a look at different plants that we got going here. So, let's start talking about weeds, y'all. Now, the great thing is, in this high tunnel, they have been doing a really great job in managing their weeds. I am very proud of this, now that I say it. So, on my right hand side, y'all left hand side, we have beans, which we know because one, when beans come out, they're always going to have two primary leaves, right? But when you're starting to grow and you plant things, you want to make sure the things that you're growing are the things that you actually want to grow. So we have a few different plants over here. They're sporadic, but they gotta go. So one, we have this plant right here. I'm gonna be honest, I don't know its name, but it's a part of the trees that line our driveway. Most places don't have these, but understand this weed spreads through its roots. So what it'll do is it'll grow through the ground. And as it finds new spots, these roots will splinter and tiller off and create new growing points so that eventually, I just broke that one up, you can get a new plant from there, right? And so what we do is those plants you really can't, if you spray them, you'll damage the plants you actually like, such as our beans, because they're all in a class of plants called dicots. They're broadleaf plants, right? And so any chemical you spray on that will harm these. And so I'm gonna be honest with y'all, I try not to use chemicals. Now, when I first started this journey in agriculture, that's all I did. I could burn this whole entire field down and everything here would die in 3 days, because that's what I was trained to do. But because we are in the city and this is a school and community garden, I try and minimize our chemical use, because one, we only have one planet. And then two, sometimes I have people that come here when I'm not here. And when you spray things, you're supposed to have signs and signage that say what you sprayed and how long people cannot go back. And I don't want people to not be able to come and look at stuff. Okay, hold on. Straight up the headset. Oh, there we go. All right, come on, y'all. All right, so let's come over here. We're gonna look at some of these weeds. Right, we got a patch of weeds right here. They good. So this right here, believe it or not, it's a patch of weed we call
A little bit louder.
it's called milkweed. And so although in some areas this is actually protein, when you get the seeds from this particular weed, they make different foods from it. One place or one food I heard, they cook it and then they put honey on it and they call it alegria or something like that. But to us, because this plant grows up so huge, so wide, so quickly, it tends to shade out. And you see how dense it is, right? That's because of the seed head. It'll shade out any plant low like this squash over here. It'll shade that out so that they don't get enough sun, and then they're not going to produce the fruit, just like we just discussed. So one of the reasons that weeds are not our friends is not because they're just hideous, but because they tend to outcompete the plants that we actually like, the ones that we planted, that we paid money for, that we want to get food from. And so the way you can identify this particular plant is one, when it comes out, it's going to have a leaf that looks like a boat paddle, right? Right. And then when you flip it over on the back, it usually has a form of pigmentation that's red. Cool. So boat paddle on the front and red on the back. Okay. And so it grows up. This plant, if left alone, can grow up to 8 feet and have a base stem or a main stem as thick as a pipe. Okay. And then that makes it really hard for you to get rid of them. They have a really expansive root system. And then once they grow that big, you'll get a whole bunch more seeds, and now you have a bigger problem. It just keeps spreading, it keeps spreading. So the easiest way to get rid of these is just to take them out. You pull them out. What I would do is always make sure when you're pulling weeds like this, You want to get them before they get to the flower stage and the seed stage, because if you were to do this while they're at flower and seed stage, you're gonna spread those seeds, and now you're just recreating the problem you already had. Right. So that's that. We have another weed over here. This one right here. Oh, make sure I got that. This plant right here is your regular everyday dandelion, right? And so the way we know it's a dandelion, okay. Oh yeah, see, get it. And so we know this is a dandelion because, and I'll take questions right after this explanation. We know this is dandelion because of the lobed leaves. So when we take this leaf right here, you see how it has these deep like gaps. We call those lobes. Well, this part is what we call a lobe. We call these the ridges, but you see how lobed it is? Look at all these lobes. But also, if you look closely, I hope I got a good angle. If you look closely on the edges of the leaf, in those lobes, you have these serrations, kind of like a knife. And we call that a serrated edge, right? And so that's how we know it's a dandelion. Now, with dandelions, what you want to do when you're taking those out, one, I have a love-hate relationship with dandelions, okay?
I just hate them.
You hate them, right? The reason why I have a love-hate relationship is because dandelions are usually the first flower to come out in the season, and our bees, our pollinators specifically use them as the first source of pollen that gets them over the hump until everybody's pretty flowers start coming out. And so that's why I don't use chemicals, and that's one of the reasons the park district stopped using chemicals too, right? But once they start producing, they produce so many seeds, and those seeds fly so far. And so for that, what I like to do is I make sure I get them before they get to flowers. Most of them get to flower stage, especially at this time in the season, because we have plenty of flowers for the bugs to get to. Early in the season, I kind of leave them alone. And then I'll take them out once I see the head is turned to the white seeds, like take them out before they can spread. But later in the season, like right now, July, we're pulling all that up. And you want to make sure you try and go as close to the base of the plant as possible and pull up the entire root and the stem, because they do have the ability to spread via the roots like that plant I mentioned over there. Okay. Do we have any questions?
Can you read the question, Danielle?
Someone is asking, are the chicks helpful in the garden, and where do the chickens go in the winter?
Oh, that's so cute. So these chickens are more because we like chickens. And they are helpful. They are. Like when we let the chickens out, these dudes are new. We just got them 2 days ago. But I have full grown chickens, and what I do is I let them out and they will go through and eat like grubs. And you don't want them to eat all the worms, but they will eat worms and different insects that you see out there. They definitely eat ticks. They eat all the nasty ones we don't like. And so their poop is also pretty beneficial as well. I don't use animal poop in the garden though, because for Food Safety Modernization Act reasons, I just try and minimize the amount of animal poop that we have near where we're growing our food. And so these chicks are just with me because they cute. They're cute. But yeah, we try and minimize the amount of animals we have in the field, and the chickens, they occasionally walk around, and it's more of a, we try and keep them back where they're at. So these chickens, we actually have a chicken coop for them, and we winterize their chicken coop. They stay outside all year long. And so the great thing about chickens is as the season changes, they will gain and lose feathers on their body, usually underneath, like the cute ones, these are chicks. They usually add more feathers underneath the bottom of them, and that'll increase their coat and make it so that they can withstand the temperatures. That's how we use those very same feathers in our coats and stuff, if you think about it. And so that's what they do. And so in the summer, usually late spring, early summer, they'll start molting and they'll shed feathers because it gets hot. And then towards the end of the year, around like October or November, they're gonna start getting a little bigger because they're growing more feathers because they feel the temperature change. Cool.
Danielle, any more questions? I can't see.
Do y'all have bindweed on the farm?
Yes, we do. Okay, come on. And we'll find some and let's talk about it.
Hey, to recap on the dandelions, so the bees, are they dependent on it?
The bees do require, and they kind of do depend on dandelions in the beginning of the season, but I take them out right now. So we're gonna find bindweed and talk more about that.
All right, we're looking for bindweed. Look at that.
So we got some right here. We found some bindweed. We actually have a few different types of weeds here. And so this weed right here that grows, it's growing out, and of course it's tillering. You have different plants right here. This is what we call bindweed. We know this is bindweed because of the leaf shape. One of the best ways to identify a plant is by its leaf shape, right? So as we look at this leaf, bindweed tends to have a spade, or they call it spadate. It's kind of, or lanceolate, excuse me. It's called lanceolate. It's like a knife or a sword shaped leaf, and it tends to grow on the vine. Now this vine can keep growing wider and wider and wider. And just like the previous plants I just told you, the previous weeds, they tend to spread by roots. And so the best way to help with these, it depends on where you're growing or what you're growing and where you're growing, right? So if you're starting a garden and it has a lot of these weeds there, what you can do is you can actually put down some weed cloth, or you can put down some cardboard, like from a regular corrugated box. And you're gonna put that on top of it where your growing area is, and that'll actually like black out the sun. And so then they won't be able to grow there. Now, the thing about most of these plants, these weeds, they are very resilient. So what it will do is it will try and grow around there. But what you want to just keep doing is just making sure that you're getting in front of it and you're making sure you just pull them out as best as you can. You know, when we think about weeds like this, again, we want to minimize our chemical usage because only one planet. And then two, you don't know who's walking. Sometimes, depending on where your garden is, you don't know who's walking your garden. It could be animals, it could be pets, it could be your grandkids, it could be your nieces and nephews. And sometimes you don't always have time to warn people. So you see like a root like that, and you see how you got different plantlets on that root, right? This is how a lot of these weeds spread, which is why when we tell you to get it, the entire plant plus the root, you want to make sure you pull it up as best as you can. Okay, so you don't have time to tell people, hey, I just sprayed some stuff over there. So the cultural practice of weeding by pulling is therapeutic, and I think it's the best thing you can do. Cool. So bindweed, just weed cloth and pulling it. Okay, it's gonna spread. The thing about bindweed, another reason why it is also like considered a weed is because this plant can grow on top of plants and completely shadow it out by covering it with its own foliage. The whole plant will just be covered in bindweed. And so one of the things we try and do is that's why we weed back here, because as you can see, hold on.
Hold on.
We got some on this fence, and it creates these beautiful white flowers, but you see how it's growing up, and it'll grow everywhere if you allow it to. Okay, and so just pulling it up, being careful, understanding that it is going to grow via root, and yeah, that's how you basically maintain those. So
You got them.
Another weed that we want to take care of, these grasses. I love a good grass, right? But the thing about grasses is they tend to tiller, or they split off in multiple directions. And so we always want to get in front of grasses because they tend to make seed heads very quickly. And although most people have never seen the seed head of grass, grasses do put off flowers. And I got a seed head for you. As those little grasses right there grow up, they'll tend to cover areas, and that's cool. But what happens is, as we leave them in our growing areas, we don't want that in our garden. We want to make sure we got nice soil. So if we leave these different grasses to come to seed, you'll get this seed head right here. So this is what grass seed looks like. And it'll turn brown. And if you can look, you'll notice, right? There are lots and lots of seeds right there. Hundreds of seeds. And so we want to make sure this is the latest, or you can always pick it, but this is a good safe late to pick this and not spread the seeds. So just take this whole plant and take it with you, and you can get rid of it. You can compost it. Now, what I would do is I would chop that up, because you don't want, if you throw it in your compost pile, you don't want these seeds to now germinate in your compost pile. So just cut them up as small as you can. Make sure you cover them and you're adding the proper things, okay? Have questions so far?
Any more questions, Danielle?
What do you recommend for fertilizing tomatoes and strawberry plants?
Okay, what do I recommend for fertilizing tomatoes and strawberry plants? Well, one, depending on where and how you're growing them. If you're growing your plants in a container, you should always be fertilizing at least once every other week. And what we usually recommend at Gardeners is we recommend people use fish emulsion, which is basically, you can get that from the garden store. From what I'm told, and please don't quote me on this, is that worm farms, they feed the fish, and then the fish are gonna eat, and then they're gonna poop out stuff. And then that poop is what we're gonna use to fertilize our plants, because it's usually high in nitrogen content, which is what all plants and all of us need in order to create DNA. And so as a safe thing, you can usually dilute that in water, since it's water soluble. Unlike slow release fertilizers that tend to be like granules or like solid, the chance of you burning or overdoing it with the fertilizers is minimized, because usually it'll leach out or run out with the water. So fish emulsion is a good thing to use to fertilize your fruit-bearing plants, such as tomatoes, strawberries, peppers, whatever. Cool.
Anything else, Danielle?
I'm just gonna reference some of the things people were mentioning when they signed up that are here today. And people were wondering that Ursally had a question about some things that might be eating her pea plants.
Okay, so something that's eating the pea plants, what part of the plant is it eating? Is it like nibbling on the leaves, or is it eating the actual pea pods?
Oh, leaves.
Okay,
Eating
so
the leaves.
do you have a picture you could show us? I know that's weird, because it could be a multitude of things. Right now, we do have cabbage leaf moths are out. We have Japanese beetles. We also have, because Japanese beetles, right? So Japanese beetles are they're savages. They're these cute little beetles. They usually tend to be black with a green or brown iridescent shell, right? And they travel in large numbers. And what they tend to do is they're going to eat all the leaf matter between the veins of the leaf, so that your leaf will look like a skeleton. And if that's what you're seeing, that's probably Japanese beetles. And what I tend to like to do is you want to plant more flowers that'll increase your insect populations, that'll compete with them, that'll discourage them from being around. So like marigolds, that's why you see a lot of people, they put marigolds in their gardens, because marigolds invite, and also milkweed, we'll talk about milkweed later. Those two plants are so hospitable to a variety of different insects that they're either predator or prey to somebody that helps us out there. So, All right, what other questions?
Sally was saying something eats all the leaves on the 2-inch stem of the pea or bean plant.
Yeah, I would say it's Japanese beetle. It is the thing that's eating those, definitely if they're newer leaves. Because look at it like this. Newer leaves are tenderer leaves. They're more tastier, chewier. You don't have to, not chewier, you don't have to really like work on those a lot. So a lot of insects, because of the way their mouths are shaped, they're gonna go for that new growth. And also, that's another reason I encourage people to prune away from the soil, because you have all types of insects that are in the soil. We're gonna go to this squash plant right here, right? So when we think about plants like this, and just all plants, you see how you got this plant, you have your higher leaves that are more of your newer leaves, and you have your lower leaves, right? So these lower leaves, I like to prune those off. Why? Because one, we don't want anything to be encouraged to walk up this low leaf to the rest of our plant. We don't need to make a highway, a food highway, no. Also, again, for the disease reasons I told you, we want to make sure the plant is healthy. The plants that you have usually are coming from your soil, and again, by planting beneficial insects, planting beneficial flowers such as marigolds, such as milkweed, some of our native species, you'll invite insects that will compete and prey on insects that will usually tend to reside lower here in the soil and then make their way up to the bottom parts of our plants.
How many leaves would you take off from the bottom?
So right here, I'm gonna take off everything below this one. So this dude, that one, and that one, right? Because this plant is eventually going to spread. And so as we go through and prune squash, what I do with squash is I actually count the leaves, and don't double count, but on every fourth leaf, I'm gonna cut it off. Cut the fourth leaf off. And the reason I do that is just like I said with the tomatoes, we want to make sure we get some airflow through here. We don't want down here to get all warm and humid like our shower. Why? Because of squash, what that will do is that will open our squash up to a disease we call powdery mildew, right? Powdery mildew is a form of fungus, and that's because it was warm and wet at the base of this plant. And then what happens is it probably rained, that rain bounced off, got some of that powdery mildew, and because it's a fungus and it spreads by spores, it bounced from leaf to leaf to leaf. And so by coming through pruning it, making sure we can cool off underneath the leaf canopy. The canopy is where all the leaves touch, right? So if this was here, everywhere, like if this leaf plant were an umbrella, everything under the umbrella we call the umbrella canopy. We want to open that canopy up, get some airflow in there, make it so fungus can't proliferate. If it does, it's not bouncing from leaf to leaf to leaf, because it won't kill the plant completely, but it will decrease its efficiency in creating energy for the fruit that we want, which will eventually be squash. And so also it just looks gross. It looks gross. So that's that on that. Cool. Any other questions so far from the list? Any questions from here?
Oh,
Yep.
Danielle, do you want her to repeat it?
Oh no, I can
was
repeat
someone asking a question? Okay. A brown pest on Ramel's yellow squash leaves and cilantro.
Okay, so there is a brown insect pest on yellow squash leaves and cilantro. I want to make sure I'm understanding right. And I hate to be like this. What shape is it? Like, because these are great questions for our Wednesday office hours. Speaking of, we have Wednesday office hours this coming Wednesday at 6 o'clock. I'll be there from 6 to 7 answering all the questions you have. Okay, let your friends know. So if you can let me know what shape or like some identifying characteristics of this brown insect, that would be super awesome. Okay, and we're gonna keep walking. All right.
Ramel was saying it looks kind of like a beetle.
It's kind of like a beetle. Now,
What color?
What color? Is it like, okay, so is it a khaki brown or is it like a a boot brown or is it like a boo-boo brown?
I'm betting boot.
I think boot. If it's boot brown, the khaki brown makes me feel like it's going to be a squash beetle. So which? Please confirm your squash.
Ramena's saying that they have pictures on the phone and can text you. It's a medium brown.
Okay, cool. So Danielle, can you put the Chicago Grows Food email address in the chat, and then we can look at it, because that way a whole bunch of us can look at it, just in case I don't know the answer.
And I'm also going to put the office hours that Selma is mentioning. So every Wednesday we're doing what we're calling the like virtual office hours help desk, and you can come, and we really want to have people show us like what is going on in their gardens, and then Selma or other gardeners will kind of share with you what they think about what's going on. It's been really helpful for me personally in my garden. So I hope y'all come to that.
Okay, cool. So we're gonna keep walking. When I tell you, hey, let's come on this way right here, because this is actually native to where we are. So this plant right here, we call this right here lamb's quarter. And the way you're able to identify lamb's quarter, like water hemp, which we talked about in that last high tunnel when it was like just a whole bunch of little babies, this plant can grow very tall and shade out a lot of different plants. But also, it serves as like a hospitable plant for plants like bindweed that we just talked about. You see how bindweed's starting to grow up and try and cover this plant, if allowed to. If we didn't pull it off, because what they tend to do is they grow really close. And here is the actual bindweed plant right here, right next to the lamb's quarter. And it's found it and it's growing its way up. So we're gonna pull this dude, pull that dude. And so with the lamb's quarter, we can identify this one because it like bindweed has a lancelet shaped leaf, just like a sword, right? But also its growing point, its new growth, tends to have this white speckled powder looking substance, always at the new growth. And so it kind of rubs off. I'm not sure what it is just yet, but that's how one of the identifying factors. Sometimes on these, you can also, they'll come out a little more red. They'll have more pigment. This pigment that we see on the stem, that'll be more pronounced in the leaves. Usually that happens when those plants are exposed to more sunlight, because pigments act like melanin or like sunscreen for plants. And usually when you see darker plants, they can take more sunlight. All right. So this is something that theoretically we will pull. And what you want to do whenever you're pulling the weed, you want to, one, grab it from the base of the plant and you want to pull up, and then you want to shake it and get rid of as much soil as possible. Because let's be real, we need the soil. Right? Get rid of as much soil as possible, and then you can throw it in your compost pile. Make sure you remove any extra roots, because plants can grow back from roots, y'all. Okay?
What's this?
So you just grabbed an onion.
That's
we
what
actually
it
planted
looks like.
those onions with our Holy Family kids. Sometimes soil erodes, and so you'll see things. But yeah, onions, we grow those. You can grow onions here in Chicago. You can plant them in like late March, early April. And then you're gonna start harvesting them towards the end of summer. Okay. So
is that leaf color thing? Is that a rule? The darker the leaf color, the more sun it takes.
Not always, but in some of these plants, from what I've seen, that's usually it's a form of heat of light stress. It's a signal that there is a lot of light coming on that plant. Okay. But usually if a plant is green, and you know it to always be green, if it starts putting out darker colored leaves, not darker, because most people think that's brown. It's putting out a healthy leaf that happens to be like a red, because you see that can be expressed, then yeah, that's a light stress. Now, sometimes that may just be some genetic variation popping out, to be honest with you. So let's look at some of these flowers we got right here, because I keep telling everybody, yeah, plant beneficial flowers. These are the ones I'm talking about. So this right here is a marigold. I love marigolds. One, because you can cut them and they just keep on coming back, right? Plus some cultures be using these for rituals and whatnot, which I love things that have multiple purposes. You get rid of bugs and then people use them later on in the season. Super dope. We have flowers like these, zinnias. Zinnias, they will bring all types of pollinators. You got our bees, you got your flies. You get some dudes you don't like, but for the most part, when I think about beneficial flowers, zinnias are a great one because like marigolds, you can cut them and they keep coming back. Over here, we got just different forms of marigolds. And then this white one right here, it's called Queen Anne's lace. It's native to Illinois. The reason I like this particular flower is because one, it's the type of flower that grows in non-hospitable areas for other plants, which is why you'll see it on the side of the expressway, you'll see it in ditches. It has the type of root system that it actually helps in mitigating flooding, because the more Queen Anne's lace you have, their roots go so far down as rainwater, especially as it accumulates, it's gonna trickle through the soil profile. These plants can pick it up.
So this is a perennial.
This is this is perennial. It'll keep coming back. This is usually annual. Most of these are annuals. They usually reseed. So the great thing is each of these, and most people take that for granted. Although this looks like one huge flower head, believe it or not, it's actually not. It's one big flower head with a whole bunch of different flowers heads in it, kind of like an umbrella. We just don't pay attention to it. So we're seeing all phases of the flower's life right now. So this one's about to open. This one's open. This one has been pollinated. It's gonna dry. And then each of these little flowers right here are gonna give us a seed. So you see? And then that's gonna just drop right here. And then we're gonna get more Queen Anne's lace here. This is actually a really cute cut flower as well. I like this one because lots of insects like it. I find that it comes back every even year. So this year is going to be a lot, but then next year, at least over here, we might not get as much. And then that's how I know what year it is, if it's an even year or odd year. Come on. All right. So we're walking. Here we got a few different plants. We got some sunflowers right here, right? Like sunflowers, love them. Can't get enough of them. This is a weed right here. Now, this weed has different names. It has different names depending on where you're from and where you at. When I started doing ag and when I was working for Weed Science, which was a department at Iowa State, where all we did was test herbicides and how to kill stuff. That's why I told you I could burn everything down. We called this mare's tail, like horse's tail. Well, some people call it goldenrod. And this is another one of the weeds where I have a love-hate relationship with it, because goldenrod, like dandelions, is the plant or the weed that we leave alone for the bees for the front of the season. Goldenrod or mare's tail is the weed we leave alone for the bees for the end of the season, right? So this plant puts out its flower really late, think October, September, and it's gonna be this. It's called goldenrod because it's a huge, pretty yellow flower, or flowers, excuse me. And so the bees know that they can go to this flower as a source of late pollen and nectar accumulation before they know that they have to finish up their season and they're going to stay in their hive all year long. So with things like this, normally, if it's a huge like swath of them, like just, oh God, I would pull a lot of them, but I leave some behind because again, we want to be good stewards and neighbors on this planet. And I get it, bugs annoy us, but we still need pollinators to help us. And this helps them. So I leave it, okay?
What are pollinators outside of bees?
Okay, so believe it or not, the pollinators outside of bees, you have wasps, you have flies, house flies. Man, house flies pollinate so much stuff because there's so many of them and they move so much. You have ants. Ants actually help pollinate things, right? You have different types of butterflies actually pollinate as well. And so when we think about different flying insects who usually need some type of refuge, because although it's like, ooh, they fly, nice. When you think about the fact that they're so tiny, a distance to us that's nothing. To them is like they might have flown halfway across the world. And so as we leave these different flowers and plants around, that's like truck stops. And we want them to have areas where they can rest, you know? And so that's why I believe in planting all different types of flowers, you know, because what one bug may, or one insect may not like, another one may love. And so this is why we try and keep diversity. I don't try and eradicate, and by eradicate, I mean get rid of all the weeds, because the thing about weeds is, and look at this monarch right here. The thing about weeds is most of them, when you spray them, you will destroy the plant you actually want. Okay. And so, yeah, do we have any questions?
Not right now.
Okay, we got a question on site.
Okay, right
Oh.
here. Right here, this actually looked like, it used to be saffron. So this was a flower that we grew. It was just for, we wanted the kids to know what it looked like, but we left it in the ground too long. And so that's actually its flower head. And if you look at its flower head, you'll notice that the flower head is an accumulation, just like that Queen's Anne's lace, of a whole bunch of different flowers. And that it's in the onion family. And you'll notice in the onion family, I'm not sure if this one's mature enough. It's not. But when it makes seeds, each of these flower heads will put out a black seed. And so basically, if you smell it, it should smell like onions.
Where's the saffron?
No, it's in the onion family. So I think it might be an allium. It's in the allium family. So alliums like crocuses and other different types of bulb flowers, believe it or not, tulips taste kind of oniony too. I know, nobody thinks to eat tulips. And so do daffodils. Daffodils also taste kind of oniony. That's one of the reasons why when you plant tulips in your garden, you should probably always make sure you put like some alliums and some daffodils next to them, because the squirrels won't dig them up because they don't like that smell.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm. So, you know, whenever we as an organization, gardeners, whenever we plant tulips, we always plant crocuses and alliums and daffodils because of that onion smell. Keeps the squirrels away.
So it's the saffron in the flower or the root?
Saffron
that
is
you cook
usually,
with?
it's the saffron is that pollen part. So when the lady, so basically what's
So
it is,
color?
so it's a pretty purple flower, and you got to come out early in the morning, like before the dew evaporates or burns off the flowers, and that flower is gonna open up, and they're coming through and they're getting the reproductive parts, which, if I'm not correct, it should be the anther, which it's the boy part. The part that's with the pollen, and that pollen is the seasoning. And so they have to go through, and it's crazy. That's why it's so expensive, because you cannot harvest it with a machine. You got to send real people out there with scissors to go to each flower and harvest them. And they have to go at a particular time in the morning, because they need to get to it before the bees do, or the insects. You feel me? And so that's why we don't waste that.
Any more questions?
Cool. Thank you.
Are there other ways that you recommend for deterring squirrels and chipmunks?
Okay, so other ways to deter squirrels and chipmunks. I'm gonna be real with y'all. The best way, okay, and I do this in my actual garden. Well, one, you can do two things. You can plant plants that they don't like. So mint, but mint is invasive, so you want to plant it in a container, and you can plant different containers around your garden space, right? But also chicken wire. And so what I do is, and I actually have to redo it, is before I started planting things, I laid chicken wire down on the ground in my raised bed. I laid it on top of the soil surface, and I planted in between the holes of the chicken wire. And then as the squirrels will go and try and dig, they're gonna hit the chicken wire and realize they can't dig. And after a while, they realize that they can't dig in that spot. And so I put chicken wire down, and that minimizes, because I also have cats in my neighborhood. I love the neighborhood cats. But also, if you leave like a soil surface like this open in your backyard, some cats will think it's their new kitty box, and then they want to poop in it, which opens us up to like just grossness, because nobody wants cat food by the garden. So if you put your chicken wire down, cats, any of those like burrowing, the ones that like to dig, they're gonna get to the point where they realize I can't dig right here. And so that's that, or plant mint, or if you into it's on the internet, you can actually find predator pee or predator urine, right? I use fox pee. So it comes in a bottle and it got a smell to it. You smell it when you put it down. You can smell it about 4 houses down. You know something was over there. And I dab a little bit around the perimeters of my garden. Now, when it rains, it's gonna wash it away just like any pee. And so of course I keep putting it down. But those are the things I usually do. I do mint, I plant mint in containers, and then I use chicken wire. And every once in a while, if it gets way too bad, I put down some fox pee. And so that's what I do for small rodents, because they're not gonna come around if they smell a predator somewhere around where they want to go and hang. Cool. All right, what else we got?
I saw that you have some mulberries back there. Is that a plant that you like to keep, or is that a plant that you take out?
We take that out. We take that out because it grows too invasively. So the mulberry, it grows way invasively, and it grows from the back of the fence. There's like a 4 foot, like you can't see it. It's like 4 foot gap in between that back fence and this high tunnel. But the mulberries have overgrown it, plus these trees. And so we don't really use them. I don't know how to use them. I don't. To be honest with you, I don't know how to use them. And the fact that they keep growing in to the high tunnels and they grow up, as you can see on our poles, they grow up. That eventually shades out things. So which now it's like, that's a new system. I usually leave plants alone until they get in my way. That's my new thing. Man, I did get some straw flowers. So this is another flower that I like. It's called straw flower, right? Great pollinator. It makes a great cut flower, dried flower. I'm actually surprised they came up. All right, let's keep walking.
What's that called? Straw
flower. So here's another example of a grass that put out a flower head, right? So you see how this one is more mature. The darker it is, the more mature it is, which means it's ready to come to seed. So we have all of these seeds, and what will happen is, again, this is why we want to make sure we're weeding our grasses as best as we can, because all of these hundreds of seeds will just be right here. And then things like my zinnias can't grow, okay? And so we want to make sure we take that out. Our teams are doing a great job. As you can see, some of the dried grass right here. We're going to work on composting. Let's come back here. Things that we don't really think of as weeds are trees. Believe it or not, every spring, y'all see them just like I do. Trees gonna drop their seeds. And this one right here, Tree of Heaven, it grows really tall, really fast, and it stinks when you break these leaves off. And so whenever I see these, now I got a note to myself that I got to cut this one down. But whenever I see things like this tree, I usually pull those out because it drops so many seeds and they accumulate. You don't want them to, one, they can mess up your foundation, or they can just destroy anything that their roots get into. But also, as you can see with these are mammoth sunflowers. So these sunflowers can grow anywhere between 8 and 10 feet. You see how this Tree of Heaven is now like shading out completely this back row right here of sunflowers versus like over here. And you notice how they're a little bit shorter than these dudes right here. Don't have a tree blocking them. Like, look at this dude. He ain't got nobody blocking him. And so he's able to make all of the energy he needs or they need to produce that flower. And so that's another reason we want to get rid of weeds. Now, let's look it down here, right? Let me be completely honest with y'all. I do not like weeds, but if your plants have established themselves enough height-wise, weeds like this don't bother me. Unless you just like, ooh, I don't like it. I don't like how it looks. No, just leave that alone. The reason that is because these weeds will actually, their roots will serve as stabilizers for the soil. And now your soil won't erode. Plus, their size compared to a plant like this, they're not really taking too much energy from them. they had so much time before them dudes to get a good grip and root penetration to be able to dig to go further. So yeah, I leave things like that alone. Only if my plants, if I have plants that are around the same height as these, I'm gonna pull them. But these, most of their energy is being created here. This is where the flower is gonna be. There's no weeds up in here. I don't care about that. Of course, we have our line of marigolds and zinnias are beneficial flowers. So of course, be a habitat and a safe haven for the flowers. All right, so here's a great spot we did not weed. Whew. And they're gonna get to it, right? And so this spot right here is taking over weeds. You might be able to see that we have flowers or we have plants in here, but you really can't. So another reason you really want to make sure you're weeding your plants is because weeds tend to be a habitat for insects that will eventually eat on the plants you want. So believe it or not, this plant right here is a collard green plant. And it was planted with those collards down there. But because there's so much grass here that can be a habitat for them, we now have those insects eating away at these leaves, okay? And if you look back, we were just, we gotta get a different name for that one, inch plant. All right, cool. So if you look back here, we have a bee doing his job, going from flower to flower on what most would call another weed, but it's actually a variation of the common houseplant. So we're gonna use the politically correct name. It's called inch plant. That's what Google told me. It has another name, but I'm not gonna say it. So although it's great, and you can see we have that pollinator going from flower to flower to flower, they too can be a very invasive plant like bindweed or bindweed, and they spread. And they will eventually overgrow any plant that they can attach themselves to. Now, I'm not gonna lie to y'all. I got some beans back here. Some beans back here somewhere. I thought I did. Yes, I don't. That's all right.
This is beans or peppers?
That should be. It used to be a radish. Okay, peanut. Peanut. Okay, so these are actually beans right here. And you see how we
Oh, wow.
right? So these are actually bush beans. But because we have so many grasses overcrowding them, my teams probably didn't even see that there were beans right there. And so they haven't harvested them. But these you just pluck, you can pick them and you break them, and they're just like green beans, but they're purple. We actually grow 3 different varieties as an org. We grow the green ones, the purple ones, and the yellow ones. Up in here,
What's this? This is peppers or beans?
I'm trying to figure it out. Let me look at the leaves. So this looks like something that is not what I grew. I'm looking for the leaf structure. Now this looks like radishes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, this used to be radishes. So this is actually the seed pod from a radish plant. So if we were to crack this open, when it comes to maturity, you'll see, and then we got radish seeds. It's not mature though, because it's not brown. So like it put out, so radishes, of course we eat the root, right? But they're gonna put out, because here's one, this is the late one right here. Oh man, my bad. So radishes, when they overgrow, if you don't get to the root on time, they're gonna put out these cute little white flowers. These cute little white flowers gonna get pollinated, and then they're gonna give us these seed pods. From these seed pods, then we can replant them for new radishes. And you can actually you can plant radishes for the end of this season. You should start putting seeds in like right now. Start planting your radishes, your turnips, even your carrots. You can do a shorter season carrot right now, and you should be able to harvest it before the end of the growing season. Cool. So that's what that is. Not a bean, radish seed pod. So again, when you grow a radish, you want to eat the root. I accidentally broke that one off. But if it overgrows, you'll see this long stem grow. It's gonna put out these cute, they come out white. They also can come out pink. Pollinated, seed pod matures, you get more radish seeds. So we're probably just gonna leave that there. Now what we have right here though, this is actually a mustard. It's mustard We grow turnip greens, collard greens, and mustard greens here because of where we are. We are in North Lawndale. It's predominantly Black American neighborhood. This is a collard green.
Oh, collard green.
So these are collards. Collards are really meaty, and the way you can tell the difference between like a collard and a mustard, and just in general, discounting the color, if you feel how thick the leaves are, one's a meatier leaf, one's kind of but the collard is way meatier than that mustard. Feel me? It's thick. It's gonna give you a different texture. Also, mustards, they tend to have a slightly serrated edge. So remember, we had dandelions that had those sharp serrations. This one has just a slight serration along the edge. But you want a nice meaty leaf, nice serrations, and it's thick. And so, yeah, you can harvest. And the way you harvest collards is you want to break it from the base of the plant and take as much stem as you can. You can cut that off. And the reason is because you don't want to have an extra little piece of plant start growing right there, wasting energy.
Sucking energy.
Mm-hmm. Just like the tomato celery.
Danielle, I'm running low on power on the phone, just FYI.
All right, cool. And it's 11:30, so we can actually start wrapping up. We're gonna walk back towards the back, right? Do we have any questions from anybody? Do you have any questions?
Hang on, I gotta get up by you.
Okay.
Get on this side.
All righty, y'all. So that was just a brief tour of the farm we have here and some of the weeds that we know you all should have, you might interact with in your garden. And of course, I welcome any questions. And just in case you saw something in your garden or you saw something here, we welcome, again, we would love people to come to our help desk for office hours. We have them every Wednesday from, they alternate times on the Wednesdays. We have this coming Wednesday, it will be from 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. And then next Wednesday, it'll be from 12 noon to 1 p.m. And we just welcome, you don't have to stay for the whole hour. But if you have any questions, or if you know someone that has questions, yeah, just feel free to pop in. Last time I led one, we gave tours of our individual gardens, and then we talked through troubleshooting the issues that we all had individually. Okay. All right.
All right, Danielle, any other questions?
No. Oh, someone said, can you repeat? Was that about the office hours that someone was mentioning? Yes, it was. Selma, would you mind sharing again about the office hours?
Okay, yeah, so we have our office hours or our help desk. It's 1 hour every Wednesday, and we alternate times because we want people to be able to come to the office hours. This coming Wednesday, it'll be from 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. Danielle, if we can get folks the Zoom link in the chat, that'd be super dope. And then next Wednesday, it'll be from 12 to 1. We try and alternate the times because we know different people have different work schedules and we want to be accommodating to as many people as possible. And so again, with the help desk / office hours, you just bring any questions you have. And there's somebody from Chicago Grows Food there to answer all your questions. The great thing about it is, since it's over Zoom, I know I was able to take my phone out to my garden and walk people through, and I know other people did as well. And then we can actually troubleshoot your problem. We all have a visual. And it's not just one person, it's a whole group of us. And the great thing is we have growers that are new to growing, and we have some folks that are not new to growing, and then you have us that are professionals. So we welcome any and everybody that wants to come and answer questions.
Once again, can they share it? You said it.
Yep, share it. Share it with your friends, share it with your family, share it with anybody you know who's growing, who wants to grow, who has questions. And hopefully that Zoom link is being put in the chat as I speak.
Neighbors are fine.
Neighbors are cool too.
All right, guys, that's it.
Everybody.
Square.
Thank you, Selma. This was so amazing.
Oh, no problem, y'all. We have some other ones later on. I forgot what the next one is, but we do have several workshops on various topics for gardening. We got one on harvesting, we got one on pickling, we got one on, we just had one on urban wildlife. We have various different ones. Please follow us on at Chicago Grows, our ad is Chicago Grows Food. Our website is chicagogrowsfood.org. Look us up on Facebook. We just really want to get Chicago to grow your own groceries. So please do not hesitate to reach out to us. And also, we would love feedback. We always love feedback. Okay. Thank y'all for giving me a part of y'all Saturday. I really appreciate it. We'll talk to y'all later. Okay.
Thank you. Have a good evening, everyone, or good day. I'm tripping. Bye, y'all.